After making a game in Python, I thought it was high time I challenged myself by doing another project, but this time with a real programming language. And by real, I mean a lightning fast compiled to binary type of shindig. So I decided to go with a language that had been on my radar for a long time, and that language is Rust. Anyhow, I created a new folder for my project, then I went to add my game making framework. While I did look at a few options, I settled on Bevy because it seemed more mature and useful than the others. Anywho, I followed some basic documentation to get myself warmed up and to get a feel for everything, and I ended up drawing this here blue square, which apparently means I can now do anything, or so I thought. Anyway, I ended up turning the square into a player character guy. I didn't plan on a fancy game concept or anything, but I had an inkling of an idea. But I have to admit, Rust really threw me for a loop. The syntax was strange coming from Python, and I kept getting annoyed by the 32-bit floats. And also I learned you need to clean things out once in a while, or otherwise it can get cluttery. Bevy's use of an entity component system was also a new experience for me, but hey, check out this amazing gravity. I experimented around some more, and finally added variable jumping and the like. And with that, the platforming was basically complete. I found this unofficial Bevy guide to be a lifesaver when it came to some things like Bevy's update versus fixed update time steps. Anyway, I needed to make some artwork, and for this project, I wanted to make a visually rich environment. I was inspired by all the parallax layers found in Hollow Knight and Silksong, but seeing as how I'm not a drawing type of artist, I went with 3D instead. Wanted to make a smallish room where you could run around a little. The first step was to add this random block, which I then turned into this weird metallic rectangle. Then I added a foreground layer, and I started experimenting with shading and lighting. After a bunch of fooling around, I finished all the layers for the game. I added the base ground artwork, and afterwards I added a camera system to explore left and right. Then it was time to add the parallax. This part was trickier than I had anticipated, especially given my unfamiliarity with Bevy's ECS. I ended up throwing all the art to a little Godot project to see how it would all look. And once I was happy with it, I went back and put in all the background and foreground art without the parallax. Then I took another stab at creating the perception of depth. And after some effort, I managed to get it working. Next, it was time to make the player art. I started with a basic cylinder shape and slowly transformed it into a torso, and after spending a lot of time making the head, the arms, and the legs, I finally started to get somewhere. And here's what the model ended up looking like, the low poly robot. Next, I started animating it, doing things, idle poses, run cycles, and a few other things. Then I threw a run cycle into the game. I made the rest of the sprite sheets and then tested out my animations in my Godot prototype to make sure everything looked okay. It was at this point where I had to make a painful decision, and that was using a different programming language. Unfortunately, I ran into trouble with Bevy, and I was too dumb and lazy to figure it out. And also, I needed a better game idea. Goodget suggested I turn this into an infinite runner. I ran with this idea and decided to use my favorite programming language of all time, C. Greylib was here to save the day. I quickly made some moving backgrounds with parallax, and I flipped some layers to create a seamless world. And here's the final result. I put in the player run cycle, and I did my best to sync the running with the ground. Next, I made this ugly egg-shaped enemy obstacle thing. Ugh. And instead of building the sprite sheet by hand, I downloaded Image Magic and ran this beautiful command that would do all the work for me. Looky here how it turned out. After that, I coded in some movement and jump into the robot. When I was happy with the results, I added the egg thing that's zipping by right now, but this is what it looks like more mellowed out. After playing this a bit, I realized I needed to add one more movement. Ducking. This was simple enough to do with a 3D model, and relatively easy to implement. I also programmed the collision system with the eggs, and lastly I started working on level progression. The idea is that you start out slowly, and over time the running gets faster and faster. Every once in a while a new egg will appear until there are 4 in total. When you overcome these enemies you get some points. The longer you can go, the higher the score. So the last thing I needed was some music, so I asked my friend Bonzo if he can make a track for me, and he did. Here's a little bit of it right now. And I also wanted to make a track, so I made this little drum and bass kind of tune. And then I mixed them together, and I put Bonzo's track first because it went better with the pace of the game. The game progresses and gets faster, then you get my track. Anyway, I made a menu and came up with a weird name for it. Here's the final result. You'll notice the columns and lights are recolored a bit, but that's about it other than the HUD. The whole game was super basic, but it was a challenging experience. Sometimes you can find yourself stuck in development heck, especially in game dev. Whether you choose to give up or go forward is up to you. I decided to move forward and finish this, and I'm glad I did. Anyway, if you liked the video, stick around for more game dev adventures. If you hate it, then go watch Googis.